All right, everyone. Thanks for joining us for another episode of My Little Town here on Jolt Radio. My name is Yuval Ophir with Yo Miami. This is, I'm looking it up as we speak, episode 8 of My Little Town, and we're here in Allapattah at Jolt Radio Studios, giving a shout out, as always, to Jay Wakefield, the last independently owned and operated craft brewery in Wynwood, hooking us up with some tank tops and squats, an awesome Saison style ale with oranges added to look at the can. But yeah, it's a very nice, refreshing beer for those summer days out here in South Miami. This rain a little bit, it's not really been for this, but enjoying it nonetheless. And we're here with our guest, Terence Price II, great photographer based down here.
Thank you.
What's up, Terence?
Not much.
How you doing? We've been here for a little bit. We had some technical difficulties earlier. It's not your fault, though.
As long as if I wasn't standing outside in the rain.
That's true. Always seeing the silver lining.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk a little bit about you. I mean, we're gonna talk a lot about you, but let's go back a little bit. So you're born and raised in Miami, right?
Yeah, and Miami Gardens.
Miami Gardens, all right, represent. We just did it's been a couple of years, but I did a mural out there with Ivan Roque a year or two ago. There, it's like shopping plaza, 460.
460.
Yeah.
Haven't been over
there. That's all right. But so, all right. I always try to do a little bit of homework, so I'm gonna fast forward the origin story a little bit here.
Yeah.
And so you started getting into, so like we said, you're a photographer. I'll use that as a broad term, but I would say that generally your photography tends to be more kind of from a photojournalistic angle, or more documentary and more
Right.
kind of capturing the environment around you.
Yeah.
So you were given a camera, if I'm not mistaken, or if the interviews I read weren't mistaken, in 2007 by your grandma?
Yeah, my grandma.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So how old were you then? You were like a teenager?
Yeah, I think it was about 18.
Okay,
at
so
the time.
you're old enough to know what's what, but you're
Yeah.
still figuring shit out.
I was going to the Art Institute.
Okay.
And
The art? What do you mean? Like, the
Fort
artist?
Lauderdale?
Oh, like after high school.
Yeah,
I was
after
like, do I have high school now?
No. It was after high school. Well, during high school I picked up photography, but it was more digital.
Mm-hmm.
And then after high school, my grandmother gave me this old camera that was my grandfather's.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started to look up, how to use that camera. And then that's when I just started going in, I don't know, a different direction than what the Art Institute was trying to make me.
Got it. So what was, because I'm curious actually, because honestly photography is a kind of a foreign, not a foreign art form to me. Like I follow a lot of photographers. Like
Yeah.
I appreciate photography because I'm really into film, and obviously cinematography and all that kind of plays in. It's like similar things in play. But what is an institutionalized or like a school setting outlook, or like what does photography look like from a student point of view in college?
Well, in that school, it wasn't really like,
Right, and I know that school is a little bit, I can't say anything back because I work with them, but it's a little bit pay to play.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know, it was just more on the commercial side of photography.
So like fashion and advertising and
Yeah, fashion, advertising, and all that. And then that's when I was like, I don't think this is it.
mm-hmm.
Because I came across a book from another photographer. His name is
Gordon Parks.
Gordon Parks was
Wow.
after.
Okay, so let's go before.
Gordon Parks made me realize, like, all right, like, I need to go out there in my community and do something.
But so who was it before?
His name was Boogie. He's actually a photographer from Serbia.
Okay.
And he went to Brooklyn. He did a photo series called It's All Good, where he was documenting the gang culture in Brooklyn, and also they were going through
from Eastern Europe, I guess.
Yeah, then he was documenting a lot of like heroin addicts and stuff like that.
Okay.
So I thought this is like real, you know?
Right, like you could. I mean, now you
Yeah.
could relate in the sense of like that was you, but you
Yeah,
had seen like some of it.
Yeah, and then I realized like it's cool, but it's also he's providing like a different type of gaze that's coming from like a European eye.
Mm-hmm.
So the people that live there, they see this all the time. Of course, they wouldn't want to document that.
Right, it's kind of behind closed. Like it's
Yeah.
not something they're proud of. In other words.
Yeah, yeah. So to him, it was like bizarre. But then that's when I looked into like Gordon Parks and everything, and then that helped me like calm down. Like I didn't feel like I needed to use a camera to go out there and like document these activities just to be
like it wasn't for the shock value. It was more let me document what's around me and good, bad, ugly, pretty.
Yeah, and so I found that outside of AI because AI was teaching me about I don't know just like more commercial stuff.
Right, and I mean, look, you need some of the kind of the business side of it of like how do you market yourself, how do you sell without how. I don't know, maybe the IP, like the intellectual property side of stuff, like how do you protect your work.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like there's definitely you get what you get what you give kind of.
Yeah.
But
and like I took those classes too, like the media law and like everything.
Would you say that was like you still kind of use some of that stuff?
Yeah, it was pretty helpful. But then when it came to like being told like my creativity of this photo or whatever is not worth it to the teachers or whatever.
Right. In other words, they didn't place the same value on the qualities that you saw as valuable.
Mm-hmm. So then that's when I was like, all right.
And I was wondering because I as I was like kind of looking into some of what you had talked about in the past and in other interviews, when I saw that you mentioned Gordon Parks, I looked him up and I looked at some of his work, and obviously there's a lot of without saying it's like derivative of his work, but there's definitely some similarities. One of the main ones being that a lot of his work was in black and white. I would assume more given the time period that that he was doing what he was doing, but I know, and you've mentioned that you prefer to shoot and specifically 35 millimeter film black and white, and you've mentioned because it helps center you in an ever-changing world, and I like that. To break down the walls that we place around each other, and do you think that his work more than other elements influenced you kind of going down that road of black and white? Because I feel like it is a decision, and I feel like especially photographers and nowadays in the kind of the digital age, it's like I'm going to do this or I'm going to do that, and there's photographers that kind of ride the line and they do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but generally I feel like you kind of have to pick a road to go down.
Yeah, I felt like it was definitely Gordon Parks, like because I found a book of his in my dad's drawer, and I was like why does my dad have this? I was just nobody was home, and I was like looking through stuff. And I came across that book, and then I started reading it.
At least it wasn't like a stack of Playboys,
Yeah.
Your life could have gone in a whole different direction.
Yeah. It would have been scary. But, it was just an autobiography, and I started reading it, and I was just like, wow, this is pretty cool. And the fact that he also did photography, and then he stepped into filmmaking, and he was a piano player, he played in the NBA, and it was just like
I missed that one. Played in the NBA.
Yeah, like before. I don't think it was the NBA. I think it was like the ABA, or something like that.
American Basketball Association.
Yeah, that had like I don't know. I just know that their basketballs had strings on it.
What?
Like a football.
Like laces?
Yeah.
Oh.
This was like early basketball.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, but he did like influence me a lot. And then like because of him, I was like, are there more photographers like this? And then I started to look at like Jamel Shabazz, who's like documented like mostly like the hip hop era.
Right, like I know that name.
Yeah,
I couldn't tell you if I could point out his work, but
but I'm pretty sure you've seen his picture. Like if there's anybody posing with a pair of Pumas on, in a boombox or something, it's probably
Right.
from him. And yeah, so like Gordon Parks just opened my eyes to like the possibility of documenting like the human condition
Mm-hmm.
rather than calling it like street photography. The human condition just like made more sense because it seems like you're actually stepping outside your door with like a purpose.
Right.
So
It's not like a job, or it's not
yeah,
it's a calling, I guess I would say, more than
Mhm.
like, you know, it's a hobby, it's a passion, it's a job,
Yeah.
it's a whatever.
and then like reading his story was just I don't know. He went through so much because times were like super different
Yeah.
back then, and
Because he was active, I think, what, 50s, 60s.
I'm not sure the whole time frame.
I looked at his website more recently.
Yeah.
Because I was looking at the.
I just know he was
and
born
stuff.
in like 1902, and yeah,
Yeah.
in his teen years he played basketball, and he picked up a camera, and he got hired for a job, and then I guess it was when he was like more on the homeless side.
Mm.
He started to like document a lot of the things that were going on that was pretty wrong. So.
Doing some adjustments.
Yeah.
Cool. So, the where I wanted to go with that, because it was something that struck me, in response to how you described, the reasons why you got into black and white and into film. I think more specifically, as opposed to digital,
Yeah.
is this idea that, and it's funny because you use the expression pieces of your history, or pieces of history, pieces of community's history.
Yeah.
And I've actually used that literally in like presentations about a project that I'm working on right now, which involves seats from the Miami Marine Stadium.
Yeah.
So it's a little more literal there, but the figurative aspect was also something that I had in mind. And this idea of kind of leaving something behind for the next generation, or even for your generation, like, beyond you, to be like, this existed, this is like, here is concrete proof, evidence, documentation of something that existed that doesn't anymore. And I feel like there is a parallel to be had, as much as you could attribute it to like, the rise of hipsterdom and things like that, but with kind of the resurgence today of vinyl, I feel like there's this idea of, let's slow down, let's kind of appreciate subtleties and things that you don't otherwise, like, when you're scrolling through Instagram, you don't really kind of stop and smell the roses, I guess that's always been a kind of a tough thing for me in terms of photography as an art form, because in terms of its historical, sociological, like all those impacts, I think there's no question. I mean, Martha Cooper, for example, is a photographer that I have an enormous amount of respect for, and I got the chance to meet her recently and talk to her, and it's this past battle.
Yeah. I
Is
just waved. I was too scared.
I might be doing a project that, like, with her through like an artist or whatever, so that was kind of my in of like, oh, I know you're like, I know, but I would never normally, but we might do something, so let me talk to you. And it was honestly like, that was kind of the highlight of Basel for me, was like, I spoke to her for like half an hour, and like, it's cool to talk to people like that who you respect and be like, oh, they're like actually interested in talking to you. And it's like literally, like, people would come up and be like, kind of like, like dick riding of like, oh, I read your book, or my dad gave me your book, or whatever. And like, it was kind of surreal to see her respond, because she was very nice and very like, oh, like, talking to them and whatever. But then it was like, once she realized it was more on the surface, she was kind of like over it, and like, okay, another one of those, like, let me go back to my conversation. But that was off on a tangent.
I mean, she was probably like the first person that I picked up,
Mm-hmm.
like a photography book. Because I remember being in high school, and I think it was around there when I was taking pictures of my friends skating and whatnot. And then I was looking into photography, and then I was also looking into doing graffiti writing.
Okay, I did not know that about you.
Yeah.
All right.
So I went into the
What
library.
looking into?
I went into the library and I saw this book, and it was a Martha Cooper's book, and it was just photos of all the trains that she took pictures of that had, writings on it from like legends and stuff like that. So then after that, that's when I realized like, oh,
Like, let me follow in her footsteps, not in her subjects.
like Martha Cooper and then like this and that, and then I realized like, oh, I had this book from the library, it was there.
Right.
Yeah, so Martha Cooper is.
And their work wouldn't have been preserved if it wasn't for
her pictures.
The lady behind the lens.
Mm-hmm.
Which is so that's kind of something I want to get into. So you talked about a little bit briefly here, but something you've talked about in other interviews, like that you had a lot of influence by your grandpa, who I think you said did more videography, like you did more with film necessarily than photography. I wrote a question here that I then answered while doing the research, but he's no longer with us, right?
Yeah.
And with you. But
last year March.
Okay, so well,
yeah,
timing. And I realized that only because of you talked about the photograph that you took with your grandma and the flag.
Yeah.
And so it's really interesting to me, this idea, or this dynamic of people wanting to, it's almost this need for humans to exist beyond themselves, and like after they die, like to still exist in the world in some way.
Yeah.
And obviously going back as you have the cave drawings and like all that, and it's not a new phenomenon, but that was just something in general that I wanted to kind of talk about with you. But it's because I have kind of something similar where my dad passed when I was younger, and he was kind of the same way, always had the camcorder and filming and whatever, and that's what I have now, is like all these pictures, videos, and I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like that's kind of when you say it's more than a hobby, a passion, it's a drive, I feel like that some people have, where beyond what the average person is like, kind of the afterlife, or like the whatever, it's kind of this real drive to be like, I want to do something real that's going to be substantial enough that it will survive beyond me, it will be affiliated with me, I'll have some attachment to that, and I'll have ownership of it in a way, but that people after me will learn something or will gain something from that.
No, that was always the mission, like I guess when I started taking pictures like of my neighborhood and everything. And I tell people all the time, like, it took a lot for me to like take a picture of my grandfather. Like, I live under the roof with him for all my life. Like, I live with my parents most of the time, but I was always in and out of my grandparents' house. And then it wasn't until after, when I turned like 19, 20, I was back under his roof and living there, and I'm still living there. But me documenting, I took pictures of my grandmother a lot. It just took a lot for me to like ask my grandfather.
Like, even while he was still alive, you would take more pictures of her and not really be like.
Yeah, because I don't know. I tell people too, and my family knows, like, my grandfather wasn't the nicest person. Like, he's nice when he wants to be, but he's also like really strict and on top of us.
Hardened.
Yeah. So I always just like shied away from him and never asked him for anything. And it wasn't until that moment where I took that portrait of him outside, you know, I asked him, could I take his picture? And he was like, yeah, and all for it. He sat outside. I put a chair out and took his picture. And in that moment, I didn't know he was battling something, which was cancer. And he didn't tell anybody either, and not even his wife and my grandmother. And the doctors wouldn't tell her because, you know, that's against whatever code that the doctors have or something like that. So then he passed away the next month.
Right.
And then that's like why, I don't know, like photography, I don't even know if that's what, if it was something that he would have wanted, like, to live on, you know?
Right, like, you don't know if, well, I mean, but at the same time, he knew what he was going through.
Sure.
And he said, yeah, let me sit down and take this, you know, like, maybe that was, you know, maybe that's why he said, sure, let me, you know.
So,
let me do this now.
Yeah, and then that's why photography is, like, important, you know? Like, maybe that picture in that moment and me telling the story about my interaction with him and being able to build up the courage to ask him for a photo, and, you know,
maybe someone else is going to see that picture, is going to read that story on the little
and pick it up, and then
label.
Yeah, appreciate their family a lot more, like, while they're here and stuff like that. So
I like that.
Yeah,
I'm getting a little warm fuzzy.
Yeah, so it was, I mean, it was a moment, you know, I didn't think too much about it. I just woke up and I had this camera that a friend of mine, Stephania, I'll say her name, because she lent me this camera to use. So I was like, alright, I got some film for it, let me just go out here and use it and practice, you know, taking a picture of my grandfather and everything. And then later on that year, that was a picture of my grandmother. I took a picture of her holding his flag in the same spot, in the same yard.
So it was kind of like a full circle kind of moment.
Yeah.
And so where you grew up, where, like, what neighborhood?
Carroll City.
Right.
Like where?
Well, because you said Miami Gardens, but then.
Oh. Yeah, so I tried to always use Carroll City.
Okay.
But then when I say Carroll City, a lot of people are like, what? Because.
Do people know Miami Gardens more than Carroll City?
Yeah, because it
I know Miami Gardens is the street because it's an exit on that. I mean, because also my school is by there. But
so Carroll City changed in, I think, 2003.
Okay.
To Miami Gardens.
Oh, what? Really?
Yeah. Was it 2003? I think it's 2003.
A part of it or all of it? Like, doesn't Carroll City still exist? No?
Carroll City exists because people still call it Carroll City, and certain places in Carroll City are named after Carroll City.
Alright.
So Miami Gardens is like the established.
Gotcha.
You know?
I didn't know that. Alright.
So you got Miami Gardens Police, and like everything is like under Miami Gardens now.
Alright.
It used to be called, like, I did my research like way back in the day. It was called Coral City, but then they figured that there'll be some type of
corals.
Oh. Well, that's true too, but there'll be like some type of conflict between Coral Gables and Coral City, so they switched it and named it Carroll City.
And you know which way that conflict is gonna go up against Coral Gables.
Yeah. So it was called Carroll City for the longest, and I like Carroll City.
I like this. We're bringing educating people. Like,
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
So I like Carroll City a lot more.
Yeah.
So I always put Carroll City on everything. And everything I talk about, I say Carroll City. But in certain interviews and stuff, when I be like Carroll City, they'd be like, "Where's that?" And then I'd be like Miami Gardens, and then they'd be like, "Where's that?"
Right. I'm like, I wouldn't assume that they would.
I say I stay around the Dolphin Stadium, and then they're like, "Oh, that neighborhood." So, yeah,
that's funny.
Everybody knows the Dolphin.
I mean, I would know Miami Gardens or Carroll City over. I mean, I know where Dolphin Stadium is, I guess, but yeah, I know it's Miami Gardens. So something that I want to kind of touch on that ties into this idea of photography as a medium that I feel like is very important, but also doesn't always get the respect it deserves as a medium, in the sense of like, especially nowadays where it's like, oh, you know, most cell phones have pretty good I mean, compared to 10 or 20 years ago, have amazing cameras, and there's this idea of the instant gratification of like Instagram generation, whatever, of like, oh, everyone takes pictures all the time and this and whatever. What's your perspective as a photographer that generally works, is it fair to say generally exclusively in film? You obviously have an Instagram account, you post pictures to Instagram. How do you view that side of things in terms of, is Instagram good for photographers? I don't think you can avoid, you can, but I feel like then you're just being contrary for the sake of being contrary. But, how do you handle using that platform without kind of losing or giving up the kind of the things about photography that attracted you to the medium in the first place?
Yeah. I don't know. I know that that's a real thing, and a lot of people fear that. But I try not to think about Instagram too much, because, I use Instagram a lot, but I mostly use it as a way to, display, what I shot. So I'm not using, the Instagram filters or whatever.
Right.
I'm usually,
You're just uploading pictures.
Yeah, I'm just uploading it. So, most of the photographers that I know on there, they're doing the same thing of just, uploading their work and, what they already have and everything. So, I don't know. I'm not worried about anybody that's using it as, an instant tool to, take pictures and everything.
Right. Now, for you, it's more, let's say, marketing or promotion, and it's just you're showing your work through that avenue. It's not... but do you feel like there's a real... consequence is a strong word, but do you feel like there's a real impact in terms of how people appreciate your work when they go and see it in a gallery setting?
Yeah.
And is that something that... I feel like it's always been kind of a battle for photographer. Obviously I deal with a lot of visual artists, painters, and things like that. And I feel like there's always been this kind of... there's rich collectors and whatever who are oh, let me get the first edition, print, whatever, of a certain photograph or whatever it is from a name brand photographer. But I feel like it's harder to, not to quantify, but it's harder to market, I guess, or to sell photography as an art form. Is, again, just because you have kind of, you've made a mark, I think, at this point, at least, if not beyond South Florida, definitely in South Florida. For yourself as a photographer, is it something that you, how do you navigate that in terms of making your work something valuable and something that can be in a gallery and that can sell?
I don't know.
It just happened. If you build it, they will come.
Yeah, that too. But I don't know. I guess it's more like, I don't know. I know a handful of photographers here in Miami that are doing the same, documenting the streets and documenting people and these moments and everything. But I don't know. I would say that Instagram definitely helped, for me to be able to share my work, because I've had blogs, I've had Flickr accounts and stuff like that, and where nothing really was able to connect to people on a local level, and I think Instagram kind of broke that wall down to help. Now,
people feel more open, more comfortable, I guess, reaching out to you directly.
Yeah, to reach out and to also see what I do, and if I'm sharing my story, to see what type of person I am or whatever. But I guess it's just an age thing too, because if I go way back in the day, say if Gordon Parks or Janelle Shabazz had an Instagram and stuff, I can't even imagine that, really, because they had to really hustle and print their work and go to these galleries and go to
there was
these
the agents,
publications
or whatever.
So I would say Instagram helped. Now the part where it's that instant gratification where people are like, living in this digital age. And like me too, I have a digital camera, but I mostly use it for like video and stuff. But if somebody wants to do like a shoot
or a commercial work.
yeah. So I don't know. It's hard for me to sound like I'm knocking it because I'm also living with it and I'm using it too as a tool to like help promote.
Like all tools, it's about how you use it. It's not the
Yeah,
tool is
yeah.
the tool, and
Yeah.
different people use it different ways, and that's what I think what's important.
So it's like, I don't know, photography like really means a lot to me, and like sharing that visual stories and stuff like with people, and also sharing like my words and everything. So I like it for that. But then there's also people who aren't seeing photography that way, and they just use like digital and Instagram just to like quickly share these things and like pump it out just to show you like their life.
Generate content.
Yeah.
It's not even their life. It's it's the vision they have of their life, and then they're like making it fit this like picture.
Yeah. So it has like its pros and cons or whatever. So I can't say that I'm fully like not with it because I am, because I use it a lot, but I just use it in my way. And I notice like a lot of photographers who are, serious about their work, like what they do, they use it in that way to like put it out there.
Shout some people out. Who should people be following? Just because you're saying I have people in mind, but I want to hear who are you following on Instagram that you're like, I respect their work. And
I'll go from like top to bottom. So top is like New York or whatever, or people that I've admired before. Like I started getting serious.
Old school.
Yeah. So
start with the old school.
Okay, so there's Photo.
You don't have to. We don't like. Let's go to like 5 or 6 as a max.
Okay, so Photo Dre,
Mm-hmm.
who's a photographer in New York, really good. King, Texas, I believe he's also in New York. Then you go to like New Orleans and you have Melanteo, who's pretty dope. And here in Miami, you have Photo T, you have Aaron Jackson. And then there's photographers here in Miami that I learned about. There's C.W. Griffith, who shot for the Herald for a while. Carl Juice. Carl. Woosler. Documenting Little Haiti and the voodoo movement and voodoo culture. Then you have Joanne, who has Black Florida, who she documents like all of Florida, the black communities. So, and I found all of them through Instagram. So
right, and I think that's the new going to the library and browsing through a particular section. Is hashtag. Look up a certain hashtag or whatever it is. And that's
still go to the library too to like find.
I'm not saying not one or the other, but but I found out you could. So that you could there's like a Kindle version. I don't know if it's Kindle, but there's like a digital version of the library now, where you could for free whatever. But it's like there's a line, and depending on the book, it's longer wait or not. But you could check out books on a digital format or whatever, from the library. My sister told me to shout out.
From Miami Dade?
Yeah, from the library, but instead of going in and checking out the book, it's on whatever app or whatever, 2019, the future is now.
Yeah, if somebody has
and it's free.
Plug, their login or whatever.
No, it's free.
Oh, it's free?
Yeah, it's like the library.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I owe the library some money.
And I think so get that paid off and then get on that. I know that the one, I don't know if it's just the one downtown, the main, whatever, the one by History Miami, or if it's all or some of them.
Yeah.
But I know you could also, I found this out in the last couple of years. I've never used this knowledge hands on, but I know that you could check out actually vinyl records. But
oh, okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Fun fact. Yeah. Cool. So I'm gonna listen back once we get the archived version of this show, and I'm gonna follow some of those people because I know some of the more local ones you mentioned, but yeah, definitely want to check the other people out. Now, so something I want to kind of get into for the last little bit of the show that we have is, so I think because I'm planning my words in my head now of how I'm going to say this, but I feel like there's so you've been at Art Center for how long now?
1 year and about 3 months.
Right. So I mean, obviously a very important like institution in terms of South Florida, the art community and all that. They've there's a lot of artists that have started out there mid-level, gone there and kind of gone to the next level, and do you think that in terms of photography, like that's the thing is I never thought of them, I was never like, oh, photographer, art center, like it was always, I would always think of more traditional is the word, but think of more like painters and contemporary art and sculpture and whatever. Are you the outlier, would you say, or are there a number of photographers that are like, I'm just trying to clarify my ignorance in the sense of like, is photography something that they've supported, for a long time, or is that something more recent? I know obviously, and we can touch on kind of what they're doing in terms of like digital media and film and all that more recently, but
sorry. I had a cold last week.
It's the weather, the changes of the weather, It's
Like, I mean, I knew Art Center had a dark room for many, many years at their old location. And
on Lincoln Road?
Yeah.
Are we already referring that to the because is everyone out of there at this point?
What?
The Lincoln Road stuff.
No, I'm still there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But they had a location before that. Which
they had two, right? Like like a block or two.
Before they moved into the one that's now still on Lincoln Road, they had one that was like further, more east on Lincoln Road.
Right.
And in there they had a dark room, a huge dark room that had like 8 enlargers and a wet room and the drying room and like everything. So I guess they were always supported in photography or whatnot. But maybe like the interest then was probably still like painting and more contemporary art and sculptures and all that. So I don't know. I don't know who was before me that was doing photography. I know there was several people that were photographers and working out of there.
But in other words, it's not like you're there and there's 10 other photographers that are artists in residence.
No, there's me, and then there's another photographer, and there's another photographer, Anastasia, and Philip.
And that's out of, I mean, they have a good, 50-ish or more? 50? I don't know how many, I don't know.
No, there's like, I think there's 13, 14
that's it?
Resident artists there.
It seems so big.
Yeah. Nah, every year it's only like 13 or 14. So,
okay, so I mean, it's still like, let's say it's still a low percentage, but better than what I was thinking.
So, I mean, photography it's not like, it doesn't get picked up as much as painting does, or sculpture.
Picked up by who?
Just the art or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, because I don't know.
Because it's easy. My view on it has always been, you're always gonna have the immediate reaction or the, let's say, more lowbrow or like the less thought out reaction of like, oh yeah, I could just print that out.
Yeah. And
it's like, it shouldn't be the photographer has to like watermark everything to the point of like you don't want to look at it on a screen.
Yeah.
So that people aren't printing it out left and right. But again, as technology advances and as you could have whatever fuck like great printer and just go online and go like, oh, let me just print this out.
Yeah.
And the artist doesn't see anything from that, and it's that that's the funny thing is if you look at how many times that image gets used. Yeah. And if the artist could charge the same way as like music, and music also gets abused and whatever, but like that's why I think because it's so easily stealable,
Yeah.
for lack of a better word.
Nah,
It kind of, that's how I think it ended up in the spot where it is, where, like you're saying, it's not at the forefront of like collectors or like whatever, like the critics. I mean, there's critics, but which is unfortunate, but I guess it's the nature of the beast in terms of, I mean, I guess it's always been the case, since there were photocopiers and whatever.
But then that, like, that's not even like a fear of mine. It's like being a photographer and trying to get into the art world or whatnot. Like, I don't even think about that as an issue or whatever, because I know, like, there is a lane for it.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that what I'm going out there and what I'm capturing and like what I'm talking about isn't coming from a place where
that's not the driving factor. That's not the driving force.
Yeah, like, it's hard to describe, because I could easily get lost in that and see like no future in it, and then start shooting models on the beach, and getting sucked into the advertising.
Shout out Depot, I must say. Yeah. I love you.
So, I mean, that's cool. That works for people that want to get paid, and I want to get paid too. But it's like, I don't know. I think there is a market that really believes in, the act of
the artistry.
The artistry and like preserving what is like right now. And I don't know, it's something about that can't be really, I don't know.
You can't put a price tag on it.
You can.
Right. I mean, you can put a price tag on anything. It's America in 2019. But for you, I feel like it's not a question of what is the price tag. It's a question of what message is this sending. What piece of life is this preserving?
Yeah. And there are people that are hungry for that, Which
that brings me to kind of one of the other things that I wanted to talk on, because you've talked about in other interviews the idea of preserving communities kind of before and as they disappear due to gentrification and development and all that, with the hope that your preservation will kind of help those who are coming into those neighborhoods and who will be there down the line when those communities don't exist anymore in the way that they once did, that it'll help them appreciate where they are and the people that came before them more than if they didn't know anything about what was there before them.
Yeah, and it's not really like it's not the people that are coming there to know like who existed before them, but it's like the people like outside of the community and stuff like that. And like, since I do document the Black community a lot, I'm speaking strictly towards like Black communities like all over, because a lot of the struggles now in these communities are pretty much the same. Like, everything's getting pushed out for.
Could be Opalaka, it could be Little Haiti, it could be.
Like, everything's getting pushed out for something else, for somebody else to enjoy. So when I'm usually talking about that, I'm talking about like, say there's a Black community in Pahokee, Pahokee, Florida. Yeah, so it's an area that we don't know.
Right. We
don't know too much about, and because
I'm born and raised Miami, and you're having to explain this to me. So it's we're gonna put that up on the obscure.
So there's a film out right now about Pahokee, and they're winning a lot of awards and everything, which is great. They won at Sundance. They won here at the Miami Film Festival.
It's like local filmmakers, or not, I mean, it doesn't have to be.
I'm not sure. I didn't get to see it.
Okay.
But I didn't know a place called Pahokee existed.
Okay.
And the fact that they're documenting like a Black community in Pahokee is like.
But so we're talking about like Miami region, or it's like North Florida?
Northern Florida. Yeah, or mid, like outside of Okeechobee.
Yeah, like the South Florida, like not South Florida, but the South.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. Like the image and the visual arts, like documenting and like pictures and stuff. makes me know, like, okay, like, these people in Pahokee exist.
Right.
So if somebody was to come in there and wipe them out, I know that they're not the real Pahokee people, because these people are the Pahokee people because that exists. So,
Right.
like, me documenting now for these communities is not for people moving in to know, like, okay, so these other people existed before us and, like, we're here or whatnot. But it's just like, now if, like, I'm in a different community and, like, thinking about Carol City, like, oh, okay, so Carol City is now like a hipster land.
Is it?
No, I'm saying, like,
Oh, you're
people
saying
are
future,
moving in,
right.
yeah. But, like, because, you know, I took pictures there and, like, stuff like that, so people know, like, what it was before.
It's kind of, I mean, as much as it's like yes and no as I say this, but like Nanook, like, I'm assuming.
What?
Nanook, like Nanook. Like the Eskimo, it's like 1920s or whatever, the film, like the silent film about like the Eskimo like community or whatever.
Okay.
Which was very much, in a sense, kind of exploitative, and it wasn't someone
Right.
from the community that was doing it. It was like white people going out and being like, "Oh, look at these Eskimos."
Yeah.
But it was kind of meant to. It was like a very early version of like a documentary down the line, and basically trying to be like, oh, let me depict the day in the life of these people, that the people who I'm showing this movie, you know, this film to down, you know, in a totally different part of the world, have no idea exists, or you know, any of the kind of minutia that make up their life.
Got it.
Now you're gonna go watch
So,
it.
I'm documenting a place where I'm from.
Right.
So it's coming from me. It's coming from my eyes, my gaze, or whatever. So
you don't want to leave it for the outsiders who come in after to come and be like, oh, this is what was here. You want to be like, I'm here, and this is what's here.
Yeah.
And it might not be here tomorrow, but right now this is what's here, and I see it, and I appreciate it.
And I want my people in different communities to fight, you know, if this is going to be wiped out within, like, the next couple of years. And I want them to know, like, this is what's getting wiped out. But, like, this is what's there already. This is what's here still. And, like, you're not coming to this community to do whatever because you just don't know too much about it. But, like, through my pictures, I'm showing you, like, this is us. This is we. This is where we are. This is what we have. And you know. So, I don't know. It's deep to think about. But, like, Miami is, like, constantly changing. Like, every...
That's why it's called the Magic City.
Yeah.
Overnight it transforms.
Yeah, so like everything is like changing constantly. So I don't know.
Well, so and that's kind of one of the things that I wanted to kind of pick your brain about as someone who's so directly, you know, tied into what's happening. And obviously, I mean, I've been in Little Haiti for almost 10 years now, and my family for like longer than that. But you know, that's, you know, the announcement was just made, you know, relatively recently, and so that kind of you know, it was going that way. But Art Center, you know, Ulite now is going to be, you know, 10 blocks from me. How, like, you know, I'm just curious as someone, because I myself have like kind of mixed feelings about it. I'm like trying to be like, I have to kind of you know, put that voice, I have to like talk to myself in my head and be like, nah, like don't be like so cynical, and don't be like whatever, and you know, I know yourself included, you know, Jason and Kareem and you know, and Vivian and all of them, and like I know enough people that are whether benefiting or involved directly with that move and with what's happening, to be like, I can't hate on it, you know, just be like, oh, fuck that, like, oh, coming in and, you know, neighborhood and whatever. And obviously, you know, everything that's going on in Little Haiti has been for some time now, like, you know, a year or a couple of years. I mean, I've seen it for a handful of years already, kind of building up. But this idea that, you know, an institution that you're a part of and that has helped you, I think, without a doubt, in terms of whether it's your own growth as an artist, but also in terms of like a career or like, you know, opening doors and things like that, you can't deny that it's had a positive impact on on a lot of things, and whether it be like the film community, or like the art community.
Yeah.
But you also can't deny the impact that it's gonna have coming into Little Haiti, and kind of continuing that momentum, or adding to the wave of things that's contributing to Little Haiti not being the same Little Haiti that it was. And again, to be determined. Is it going to be Little River? Is it going to be Magic City? Is it going to be, we don't know. But
it should stay Little Haiti.
I agree. But it's the funny thing is, I think it was 2013. I tried to organize the Little Haiti Sunday stroll, and the idea was to kind of, I was like carrying over the idea of like the art walks back in the day in Wynwood, and like being like, oh, let's do that, but we'll make it a daytime thing, and we'll do like whatever. And as soon as I started promoting it, this guy, shout out, Peter Ehrlich, who, if you're at all familiar with the things happening in Little Haiti, you've seen him speak like at City Hall and stuff. So he's the Lemon City guy, who all his properties painted white, and puts Lemon City like very prominently on them, and was very opposed to the adoption of the name Little Haiti officially for the neighborhood. Messages me on Facebook again, 2013, whatever it was, like, because he's, I was calling it Little Haiti Sunday Stroll. It's like, oh, well, it really should, you should take into account however he said it, but it was in a very antagonistic way, like, oh, it's Lemon City, it's not Little Haiti, basically. And I'm like, listen, when you organize your art walk, call it whatever you want.
Right.
I don't like the name Lemon City because it makes me think of the lemon law, like with cars, where like, after it doesn't work for 3 times, you trade it in. I like Little Haiti. Like, I don't like the ring of like Lemon City.
Right.
And that's that's still going on now, despite the fact that the official recognition and whatever. But I just think it's funny, complicated, whatever.
It is
but
complicated.
It is, it's definitely.
I mean,
like, what's your view on that? Like, I guess just to kind of wrap things up, and then we'll get into like kind of some plugs and stuff. But
my view on it is like, what is it gonna do for the community?
And if not them, it's someone else. Like that's how I look at it. Is if it's not them, it's gonna be someone else. And at least with them, you see that they've nurtured, they've provided a platform, they've provided opportunities for
Miami artists.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I can't shit on that.
And
as
I
much
can't
as
shit
I
on
might.
it too.
I'm like,
as many times as I've applied for Art Center before, getting denied and everything, like, last year was the opportunity where I got a taste of what having an art residency is. So it's like, I don't know. And change is
always hard.
Sometimes it's inevitable. Sometimes you can put up a fight to stop these things. But in this situation, it's like really tough for a lot of people to swallow, because Art Center is a respected institution. So for it to be moving into this land where it's like, really tough right now.
I mean, but that's the thing is, you can't deny, like, I feel differently towards the news of, like, Art Center, picking Little Haiti, which, are they, I actually have to look, like, is it Little Haiti or River, but they're, like, what they're, kind of branding it as.
I don't know, I'm still saying Little Haiti.
But, right. But, when you compare that to, what was the other one? I mean, obviously, like Magic City and like those developments, but when you compare it to the galleries that have been opening there, and you compare it to ICA, for example, which obviously is design district, but that bulldozed a handful of houses, for their sculpture garden, which I went to, and it's like, it's fine. I don't houses.
Yeah,
Like I actually went for the first time recently.
I don't go to anything over there that's not
Someone you know.
not even someone I know, but like that's coming from something pure from Little Haiti. Like I've been to the Little Haiti Culture Center numerous of times, and then that's it.
Yeah.
I don't support anything else over there.
Yeah. You come to US with
Yeah, I've been to your space, but you know, but like, you know, like why would I come? You know, your space. Like why would I come there? It's because of the people that's there. You
Right.
know? I know that there's people that's there that is supporting things that I support, and that's standing for things that I believe in. So like you think about like what they're doing, and like who's there and who's behind the scenes and who's caring for people like me and who's caring for people of the community, then it becomes like a touchy topic because of
it's
battle.
this, but it's also that.
Yeah, and then the battle of the land is like it's tough.
Yeah.
And like you know, I get people coming up to me all the time asking me about Ulite, but unfortunately I'm not in charge of Ulite, so I can't.
You're just getting carried along in the current.
Yeah, but this is a change that's going to be happening years and years down the line.
Right.
So I don't know. This is my last year at Art Center, now Ulite. And I care for Art Center and I care for the staff, I care for everybody because, you know, they helped me at a time where I wouldn't say I wasn't believing in myself, but they helped show me that I should believe in myself more. Right. And like what I'm doing is right and what I'm doing can go places, you know? So it's like to think about where they're going now, I can't speak on that.
Right.
And what's stopping everybody is because of, you know, where they're going and the space that they're going into.
All right.
So
we'll let time unravel.
I'm sure people are gonna fight. And I don't blame anybody.
All right, so we gotta wrap it up. Terence, where can people follow you? What do you have coming up for people to check out?
I have a talk tomorrow at Simply Good, which is in Little Haiti, but I don't have the exact location.
You just look up
the
Simply
address,
Good.
Yeah, it's called Family Style, and I'm gonna be talking just about family and about my work and practices and everything to close out the show that I have at Art Center, which is on Lincoln Road on the beach, Dancing in the Absence of Pain.
Which, by the way, I love that name.
Thank you. It's up till March 31st. And if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's at mxlawkey, which is MXLAWKII. And yeah.
So it's Locky, not Loki.
No, not Loki. Locky, which is the acronym for Life as We Know It.
Okay.
Yeah. And 2 I's because I'm named after my father, and I'm the second. So yeah.
Awesome. All right. Terence, it's truly been a pleasure.
No problem.
And yeah, John. As always, Yo Miami, yo-miami.com. It's Yo Miami. Jolt Radio.